So enjoyed your podcasts, and if just clarifying some of those questions that we all have about what is your artist statement, and how to work out what the galleries are right for you and all this kind of thing. So
yeah, that was actually quite fun to be able to share, because I know you don't know what you know until you have to explain it sometimes, which is helpful. It's helped me clarify my practice. But also recognizing how often people approaching me would shoot themselves in the foot. And, I'd grouse and grumble to my staff member, why do they do this? And she pointed out, because they don't know any better. And it was like, yeah, okay, well, that's fair. So, it's nice to be able to share practical things that are making a difference. I get a lot of good feedback from that. So thank you.
You've worn so many hats through your career, so it's great to have that overview.
Yeah, well, it's a journey. Mine's been a bit more convoluted than some.
Well, I see that as exciting, but
yeah, well, I wouldn't change any of it. It's quite weird that you look at it and you think, if I just stayed focused on X or Y, and then the realization is if I did that, I would have missed out on the whole rest of the alphabet. So you just got to own it, and this is what it is.
Did you know you always wanted to be an artist?
I did. Right since I was tiny. It was the only way my parents could shut me up, because I am a talker. And my favorite word was why. So I was questioning everything. And yeah, that idea of making stuff, making your own reality right from scratch excited me. But I didn't know what an artist was, what it looked like. You get these glimpses through either Hollywood or the way people talk, but I'd never met an artist, so I didn't quite know what it was that I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to make stuff.
It was a huge leap when you decided that you were going to be an artist and throw it all on the line.
Yeah, that was scary.
Yeah.
Especially because my wonderful wife didn't get any warning. Or at least no official warning from me. It happened in one of those moments where you just blurt it out and then it's done.
Yeah.
Luckily, she saw it coming probably better than I did, so she was quite tolerant of it. But yeah, then you've got to make this thing real. You really do. You have to sit down and work out, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to do it? Today I spent this morning picking up some steel and getting it all settled into my studio space, because I've got this urge to do a biggish type of metal sculpture. And yet at the same time, sitting right behind me here are literally stacked dogs, where I was doodling around while I was thinking through the other jobs. So
yeah,
it's kind of this weird thing of, I think as long as I'm productive, I don't really want to put myself too firmly in a box, because I use humor as part of my communication technique. So the pen and ink allows me to explore ideas and build relationships quicker with humor. And then with the sculpting stuff, it's more antisocial. You've got earmuffs, angle grinder going, or fire and gas, and hot metal. So that's not as engaging. It's more internal space that I indulge myself in me. So each of them, kind of like picking a meal for tonight, you don't want the same thing over and over again. So I'm lucky that I can go into a lot of those different fields.
No, I was just going to say, so what do you think have been your biggest challenges through your career?
Oh, focus, more focus. I keep learning new things, and every time I learn something, I learn that I don't know as much as I'd like to know, and then I want to learn more, and I want to play. And the more people who have these incredible skills you spend time around, the more you become aware that we all use similar skills. It's often process or tools or opportunity that's different. And then you start to think about the fact, well, if I've got similar design abilities, then why can't I do it? I just need the right tools or the right, and so focus is the problem, because I keep falling in love with new techniques or new ideas, which isn't always helpful.
understandable.
Oh, yeah.
um,
I read somewhere recently that it's gas. The term gas, gear acquisition syndrome, is something that I have. I love tools. I love buying gadgets and creating spaces. So, I have gas.
Yeah. I think we have gas in common.
Creative gas.
Were there any tips or anything that you could share with us that can help us when we go through? Because that's also one of my passions, is that we're not all perfect, and it doesn't all come to us. We're not magically, or we all have skills and talents, but we all also have hardships and challenges that we need to get around. And sometimes I think by being so isolated in our own environments, those things are amplified. And I just wondered
I agree. Tips. The truths that I've found for me, and for a lot of the artists that I've dealt with over the years, and gosh, it's into the many hundreds now that I've represented, probably the biggest ones are life happens, and you have to accommodate it. Sometimes when we're in our creative phase, we really want to focus, and we can get frustrated at things that seem to be getting in the way, but they generally will enrich the experience if you can just process them and get them out of the way and then move forward. So allowing yourself to take time out. We don't have to be human doings all the time. It's okay to be a human being, as my mate Bruce says. So giving ourselves permission to take time out. I think often we feel a little bit of guilt if we're a small business, if we're not as busy as we possibly can be. There's that fear that we're actually having too much fun and maybe we're not taking it seriously. And I think, so give yourself permission for that. Tell your story to as many people as possible is another one. People generally, they want to see you succeed. And if you tell them what your goal or aspiration is and what you're trying to achieve, and you share that openly, suddenly you can have an awful lot more help than you appreciate is available. So that's another one that's kept coming up again and again. When you share your story and tell people what you're working towards, it's amazing how often they go, oh, well, I know somebody who's doing such and such that might be able to help you with that. Again, because of our isolation, we often think our reality is quite different from others. And it is, but there will be similar things. And probably the only other one worth putting in that mix is when talking about your work or what you're doing, try to talk about your feelings, not your processes. If you're opening new doors, you're trying to get other people involved. I've noticed more often that if I say to somebody, I'm trying to make you, the viewer, feel a particular way, because we all have feelings in common, people get it. Whereas if I focus my conversation on the tools I use, the process, if they have no experience with my world, they'll close down because it sounds just too complicated. So to include others by talking about the feelings that you want to share or engender in the work, or that you had when you were making it, can open so many more doors, especially when you're talking to galleries and places who are going to represent you. Because those places are looking for ways they can talk to other people about you, and feelings, again, that's their way forward. So
perfect.
They're the main ones. And then probably the only other one that really is worth putting in that mix would be that we all have to start somewhere. And so often people will begin conversations by pointing out their faults. I'm only beginning. It's the first time I've done this. I'm not really happy with this, but it's probably better to start your conversation and with somebody, if you're wanting to share your work, by asking them a question than telling them about your problems, because you'll learn more about what you've achieved that way. And also you won't burden them with your issues. And often we're detail focused. We're trying to solve a problem. So if you're asking them, what do you see in it? you're going to come away with an appreciation. If you tell them all the things you failed at, they're just going to go away feeling like that was really probably a sad experience for you, and they don't want to talk about it to you, even if they did like it.
Yeah. Well, as Kiwis, we tend to have that tall poppy syndrome, so we never want to stick our head up.
Yep. Yeah, we all know our mums in the background saying nobody likes a boaster, yeah. And you're not showing off. If you're explaining your passion, that's not showing off. That's being informative and genuinely enthusiastic, and that genuine enthusiasm is wonderfully uplifting. If you're busy saying, "Oh, don't look at them, look at me, I'm better," yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah,
that's how you do it. Yeah.
You know, what are some of the things that an artist can provide a gallery to help others look at their work?
Stories.
Yeah.
You know, human interaction, right, since the caveman times has been about people coming together and sharing stories, whether it's about migration patterns for hunting, whether berries are ripe at what time, or family connections, whatever it is, we've always been storytellers. It's what's essential.
Mm-hmm.
And as artists, what we're doing is we're saying, we entered this part of the world in this moment and saw these raw materials and decided to rearrange them. And at that point, you've got an obligation to explain why. And it might be that you don't have a direct reason, apart from I really wanted to test myself and see if I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But you do need to give them a reason to engage. And so storytelling is really important. And for galleries, on sellers, collectors, what they're wanting to do is now show your work to somebody else, and they need a reason why. So that's where the storytelling is great. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but insight, you know, she's just spent the last 5 years studying all the different ways that she can present blue on a curved surface. Is a story. There's actually a why there. What, how, who, tell me more. So it's a way in. Right. So galleries especially need stories. Your story, how you got here, the story where you're going, and the story of what you're doing. They're the cause.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and also when you start questing within yourself as to why am I doing this, the benefit that comes from that is you start to notice your own trends. There's an awful lot we do instinctively. So I consider myself a creative, and in one of the podcasts I talk about whether or not you're a creative, a technician, or a patron. And creatives tend to be drawn to new, shiny. With the magpies, we like something pretty and dazzling, and we get bored quickly and move on to the next thing. But within that, there's still stuff going on that can be really insightful and interesting to share with viewers. And if you're a technician and you're into process and you like mastery and getting it right and going through sometimes a laborious process, it's something like glass especially, some of the techniques can take a lot more work at the front end than anyone ever appreciates when they see the finished work. And you've got to push through that. So how do you push through it? What do you do? That's the stuff that's worth sharing because it's not instantly evident. And that's that whole idea of you can inform quietly and you add value. That's always good. Value's essential.
There's a lot of artists out there who are makers or see themselves as creating and they don't want to market. But we know, that we've got to kind of wear both hats. So
yep. I think probably the big trap that people fall into is that they assume that the arts are different from anything else. When it comes down to it, we make a product, and it's either a product that will enhance an activity or an action or a space or an emotional state. So we know not really any different, sadly, even though we may be attached to thousands of years of tradition. We're the same as a chair or a cup or an automobile. So the way we market is pretty much the same insofar as we have to offer people either a solution for a need they have or a way of attaching themselves to a social strata that they'd like to belong to. And so if you recognize that that's what you're selling, and you're a jeweler, and you're making, say, a big, bold brooch that you want people to see and comment on, then the person who's going to be wearing it will be wearing it because they want somebody to notice them and maybe use this as a way of engaging in conversation. So, it really, when it comes to marketing, it's storytelling again. And you want to pick the people who will help you tell your story the way you'd like it told. And that's where selecting a gallery or an outlet is really about looking for people who talk about other people's work the way you'd like yours talked about, or doing it yourself. Teach them.
Right. One of the things we do struggle in the glass world with is, or two things really. One is that our education facilities have mostly closed down. If you want to get a degree, you really have to go to Australia. And so we tend to be time poor, cost poor, location poor for any kind of education. So as a gallery owner, wearing your gallery hat, what are the must-sees that you'd like to see on a CV when it comes across your desk?
I don't want to see a CV. Okay. In fact, what you just described, that the lack of facility available to me is a massive opportunity. You've just given me the indication that there is a chance, because you don't have a governing thought that's pushing everyone into a funnel, which would generally over time create more and more of the same, because that's how it's going to be measured. And you pay your money to go to class, you want to pass because that's why you're there. So you then, we narrow our funnel. I think we've got this wonderful outsider opportunity where we've got all these innovative people and networking and tapping each other on the shoulder and saying, I love what you're doing. I've just got a couple of questions. Do you mind sharing a bit of time with me? And not trying to emulate each other too closely so you don't close your market down. When somebody comes to me as a gallerist and they have a long list of achievements and they've won all these awards and they've done all this stuff, that's great. That tells me that they're proactive, they're engaged, that they're focused, that they understand the value of engagement and getting out there. Those things are cool. But realistically, more people will learn on their own than they will learn in class. I think going to classes gives you connections, it gives you community, it gives you validation, really important things. But it doesn't always give you enough time to actually progress an idea properly. It's only after class that you get time to play with those ideas that they really flesh out. So, I wouldn't be worried about the lack of institutional support, apart from maybe the fact that we're losing it, and that is a shame, because I think for some it is the only way they're going to get into the arts. They need that structure. But for a gallerist, I'm looking for somebody who understands the value of what they do. They recognize the skill is of use. They are making something that's reliable, that has got solutions attached to it. A primary example would be, I had a stone carver who used to supply me, who drove me mad because he would carve the most gorgeous, it was a she, I'm trying to protect them, but it doesn't matter. They would carve the most gorgeous pieces. They'd bring them in and they'd put them down on my shop desk, and they'd leave marks all over the desk because they never finished the bottom. And I kept on having to say to them, you need to grind it off, put a little bit of felt on it if it's for inside use. Oh yeah, well, I'm really, but look at the lovely shape at the top, they'd tell me. So it didn't matter to me whether they'd been gone through the best training, they'd been off and carved in Michelangelo's workshop. They were giving me problems and I wanted solutions.
So that leads me to approach a gallery, yes or no, because there's a lot of comments out there as you don't approach galleries, you let galleries approach you.
Oh.
Am I wrong?
No, well, if the comments are out there. So one of the most labor-intensive jobs that you have outside of doing the accounts and paying out the artists and keeping the gallery merchandised and displayed well and dealing with the public is sourcing new art. Trouble is, I can't be everywhere. I'm voracious on Instagram. I keep an eye on what's going on Facebook and other platforms, but we know they run algorithms that don't feed us everything. I look at Pinterest and things like that, but it's all down to what you search for. So I'm likely to find more of what I've already found before, because that's what they feed me. So having an artist actually contact me and say, hey, I don't know if you know I exist, but I make this, and I'd love an opportunity to take a few minutes of your time to just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing and see whether we may be able to work together. You've just given me a solution. I don't have to spend time looking for you. I might look at what you've sent me in the way of a couple of images and say, this is too similar to what I've already got, which is common because people see what you represent and they go, oh, he understands my work. So, that I could still need more. Or it may be that I'm going to look at it and think, no, this is better suited to a gallery down the road who has that market really well sewn up, and I'd pass you on. But at the very least, you're now a person to me, and that's important. So, no, I believe make respectful outreach. But if you're proactive, then that's a great way. I'd put a caveat on that, though. If you have a website where you have some kind of a sales platform, don't direct me to your website, because I'm going to look at it and think, oh no, this person sells direct. I don't need a competitor. I need a supplier.
Right.
I want somebody I can work with. So send me some pictures. I'll Google you. I'll find it anyway. But if it's my first thing before I get a chance to fall in love with your work or your story, it might mean that I'm going to pull back at that point.
Right.
So there's an interview in the can at the moment that I've been having. Just life has happened. And again, I keep having interruptions with my flow when it comes to the podcast. But I'm a maker first and podcaster second, sadly. Where I interviewed the collections manager and head curator for the Suter Gallery in Nelson. She uses online as her primary sourcing of information, and she doesn't have any fear nor care as to whether or not you're selling or whatever, because her gallery is not about sales, it's about profile, and it's a community gallery. It's it's in that next tier than my dealer gallery will. So I think it will depend on who you're aspiring to talk to, and how big your region is. And if you're in a small geographical base where you're quite easily known and accessed, and you're trying to get a gallery in your town to deal with you, then there's a chance your online presence means that people will come directly to you. Unless you're really strong about directing them back to the gallery and you can prove that you're not going to let them elevate your brand and then you scoop the sales, then most of them will shy away.
Sure. So in general, it's good for artists, and I'm paraphrasing, it's good for artists to have an online profile for a gallery, to see that the artist has an online profile or a website, but not necessarily for them to be selling from that website or on that online profile.
It depends on what you're offering. So I've had an artist say to me, I will give you my large works, but I want to keep my small works to sell on through my own thing. And I've accepted that as a deal. But equally, when push has come to shove and I've been challenged in space, that artist has had less likelihood of being given the prime space if there was somebody else that was using me as their soul, because we have vested interest in each other. They're seeing me as their primary, and I'm seeing them as my primary. So we're both actually, are on the same journey.
Sure.
It's one of the parts of being a gallerist that sounds hardest. You can't say it in a nice way. No. But it is a business relationship. It's not a friendship one. We're very friendly and we become friends. But the main reason that I have their work is to sell it. The main reason they've given me their work is to sell it. So we must always focus on that.
Right.
Yeah, so it's tricky because we're told these days so much we should have an online presence. But my question is, how much time is that taking? And is that time that you really want to be doing that? If it's not, let somebody else do that and be the maker you want to be. If you love doing it and you're good at it, consider that your primary skill base and do that as your primary marketing. That's cool. I don't think there's any one or right way, but there is always a cost. The old coin, it's got both sides, and you flick it every time you make an action. You just got to hope that you keep winning enough.
So am I touching on some of those comments or some of those areas that you commented on earlier about when you were talking to your staff about, the way that artists are potentially making mistakes when approaching you?
Yeah, the big ones I got were that they were busy boasting to me about how active they were online. And when I looked at what they're doing online, they were driving sales to themselves. And I would ask the simple question, what do they want from me? And if they're already getting sales, more often than not, what they want from me is brand awareness, or they're wanting validation. By being in the gallery alongside the artists I have, it elevates them. So that's cool. I can understand that. That seems a fair and reasonable thing. So then the question is, what am I going to get from them? If they're of a lesser brand than the people I'm already representing, the only thing I can get from them is new opportunities for sales and to solidify the market and hence the viability of the gallery. And in doing that, guarantee all of the people I represent a future going forward as well as myself. But if they're not offering that because they're going to take the sales off to their stream, then they're going to win from the relationship, but we're not. And at that point, I have to wear the hat of not just me, but all the people I already have under the umbrella. And so I'm more likely to pull away. The other thing that I would get a lot of that used to be quite hard is people coming and saying things like, I'm self-taught. Again, I didn't care. First off, I'm looking at the work. If the work looks interesting and it looks well made, then I'll start inquiring as to your experience. And there's no right or wrong for me. There's just truth. There is what you've done. This is how I've got here. Then I look at, can I add value to your world, and can I add value to my world by this relationship? What do we both get out of it? And both have to get something positive, otherwise it doesn't work. And so it might be that you're self-taught and you've been sitting in a shed in the middle of Timbuktu and you've never shown before, but you can show up with work so well resolved and so commercially acceptable that you're an instant success, whereas somebody who's gone through 50 years of grinding it out and still have not quite found a voice might not make it through that filter. So it's when people load those things onto the beginning of the conversation instead of talking about the work and the emotion, back to that earlier comment, those are the types of problems that make it harder for us to build a relationship.
Glass art and ceramics. How do you see those two? How do they play together? Is there
so maybe you need to look at also in that question, what right do I have to be a gallerist? Because my opinion is based on the fact that I'm a good salesperson. I came from sales and marketing. When I moved into making my own art, I needed to do like everyone else, work out how to go about selling it. I didn't understand the art world, so I decided I'd just invent my own version of it by opening a gallery. It was a shortcut to get me out of a problem. It worked. So I'm not sure that I represent, well, I know that I don't represent every opinion. The commercial galleries that survive on sales, so they don't survive on grants or applications for funding or goodwill of others, we all have a tendency to be quite similar, and that is you can't put a Picasso on the wall in a room with no furniture. It just doesn't look that good. But if you dress the room right, then everything works well. which means that a finely made piece of furniture is a piece of artwork, and the piece of bowl or glass or whatever that goes onto that piece of furniture, as long as it's in keeping with some kind of creative flair and style, will amplify the value of the Picasso as well as the works all working together. So I've never seen this distinction between art and craft as being of any value, because unless it's hung in a gallery that's very austere, like the National Collection spaces can be, and that's not how the artists made the work to be seen. They made them to be put into homes and lived with, for the most part. Then I think, you know, you must look at everything as being connected. So with that said, ceramics is going through a bit of a flush at the moment and is getting a lot of really good uptake as people are wanting to individualize their experiences. And we've seen that in the last 10 years as, I forgive the term, but the cookie cutter type of production of homes has evolved. You know, for a long time we've had different trends, whether it was country theming or feature walls or whatever within houses. But now the manufacturing industry has lost so many of its craftspeople. Joiners no longer exist because the kitchen pack that comes from the large box stores, where they all just go together the same and you assemble the blocks and put a bench on and you're done. That's meant that more and more homes you go into, they have exactly the same basic layout, roughly the same stuff. So the adornments that we put in our homes now have more value and meaning. And so we are seeing a renaissance. So ceramics, yes, the way you dress your kitchen and your table, if your table and your kitchen looks like everyone else's, becomes more important. The glass art movement has elevated glass much quicker than some of the more traditional vessel-based functional form pieces. But again, we're gifted to live in a country with wonderful windows. This indoor-outdoor flow thing that New Zealanders thrive on and believe that we're the masters at, mean that we bathe our houses with light. So glass is also right now, if it takes ownership of it, in a heyday. And we've seen some wonderful practitioners like the Hooglands and different ones who've really pushed forward into the art glass movement. But I'm seeing some really incredible slumping. I'm seeing some amazing, some of the kilns and technologies now are so affordable and accessible that you're seeing it used in everyday functionality as well as in some really spectacular art. But the reality is that you know, we have to tell our own stories well. And if the glass community wants more people to see glass as having true value, I mean, it's got such a wonderful history. Yeah, there's Venetian glass and stuff that's thousands of years old that are around the world. There's all sorts of beautiful things that people, they know it's worth something. But we just have to remind them that it's here and it's available and it reflects their lives now.
What's next for the Artwonk?
So the Artwonk is still, I'm grinding on it. Like I said, I've got interviews coming through. I'm tired of my own voice. I want more other voices. So I've actually started a new podcast called Arting Out Loud, which is a collaboration podcast, and that's interviewing artists who go to collaborations. So I've just got back from the New Zealand one, but also artists who work with other artists across denominations more than just into specialty. Because there's so much you can learn when somebody, you know, does something different. I had a wonderful experience when I went into Shona Furman's Burning Issues, I think it was called back then, up in Whangarei. And there was a piece of cast that had broken. And I said to her, what are you going to do with that? And she said, oh, it'll probably be melted down again, but you can have it if you want. What do you want to do with it? And so I took it to collab and got out my angle grinder that I was using stone carving. I had just a simple tile cutting type of diamond disc on. And I started carving it. And she stood there aghast and said, yeah, you're mad. You shouldn't do that. And then when I'd finished with this piece, it was like, oh, okay. Because I didn't have the preconceived, like to her, the break became the point, it became less. Right. Whereas to me, that was the starting point. So the whole idea of Arting Out Loud is finding how people learn from other specialty groups that they engage in. So mainly stories of artists making weird shit. And the goal of it really is to be able to, hear that there are many, many paths to making. Yes. Yeah. And that's an interview-based show, which is great fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all your...
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Your knowledge, your time, your advice, your humour. I love it. Every time I listen to the Artwonk, I giggle. So
that's good. I wish I could.